Good afternoon. It's Mike again from Fantasy Wargaming to talk today about playing with intent. So, this is going to be a shorter video, but I think a rather important one because this is a subject that gets talked about a fair amount in the community. And I do think that we may have got to the point now where it's worth kind of establishing guidelines as to what it is and what we can do about it. So, let's start with a quick breakdown of the what's, the whys, the hows. What does it mean to play with intent? Why does it matter that we play with intent? And then I'm going to be sharing little tips about how we can try and get ourselves to be um, playing with intent, essentially. But the first thing that we actually need to really cover is what intent actually means. Intent can mean different things to different people, so I feel like it's important to establish in the early goings here that you may have a different definition of intent than I do, and that's perfectly fine because it's going to mean different things to different people. This is simply my perspective on things, and I would love to hear other people's interpretations of it, other people's applications of it, and other people's tips as to how to use it. Now, I do not want to be a gatekeeper of what it means to play with intent because for some, they do not want to play that way, and that is completely acceptable. I want to establish at the outset that if you don't feel that you would enjoy doing this, you don't feel it would make you a better player, by all means, you can simply pass this video by and not let it apply. But I think that for some people, it is very valuable. It certainly made me a better player. So, with that kind of caveat, that disclaimer out of the way, let's kind of break down what it is. Put simply, we share what our plan is for the turn and let our opponent in on our thought process. And this could be as simple as you want it to be. This could be as complex as you want it to be. And when I say share, I literally just, I mean sharing. I mean saying to them, you know, I don't have fantastic battle tactic options this turn, but I feel like I've got a good chance of going with this one, so I think that I will do so. And you pause and you see what their reaction is. Um, and as I said, it can go as simple or as complex as you want it to be. And you may think that this is a bit counterintuitive because some players play with an element of subtlety. They want to be a spy master where they obfuscate and try and hide what their plan is. So this may come as a bit of a shock that I'm basically telling you or requesting, if you wanted to consider playing like this. And we'll kind of talk about the pros and cons in a second. That bottom example, I don't think I can win this game unless I kill that slime, so I'm going to walk you through how I think I can achieve that. This actually does serve a purpose, and that's why we need to talk about why. And the number one reason with a bullet, and I'll revisit this afterwards, is good sportsmanship. So just keep that in mind before we continue. It is very helpful for many, many reasons to actually share what you're trying to achieve with your opponent. And the number one aspect of it is good sportsmanship. Enunciating, see, I'm struggling with the word, your thought process can provide clarity. I have lost count of the amount of times where I've been deep in the tank in my own mind trying to think about what I need to do. And my opponent will go, "What's up?" And I will explain to them. And as I'm explaining it, and this goes beyond Warhammer, this goes in all walks of life, simply talking about it can often mean that you go, "Oh, right, no, I can't do that. I need to do this." Or it opens things up to your opponent. And this comes to our next point. If you say to your opponent, "I don't think I can win this game unless I kill your slan," and then you explain what your step process is for the turn and trying to achieve that, they may go, "Oh, maybe you might not want to do that because that gives me an opportunity to redeploy outside of your threat range," or, "Oh, Have you forgotten about the artifact that I have that might make that tactic more difficult than you realize, and you could consider changing what your plan is? I've had that happen to me in games, and I've explained that to my opponent. Is if they actually have hidden cards, right? They have these abilities that they can use to deny you what you're trying to do. Players will fall into two categories. There are those who will go, I'm going to keep that close to my chest. And there are those who will be like, I want them to play with the information because I don't want to win through lack of information, right? It's this idea of gotchaing your opponent. We'll come to that. If you miss something, and this is very helpful, if you miss something but you announced your intent ahead of time, it is much cleaner to sort out. And what I mean by that is things like, I'm going to I've got this unit in reserve, and I need to achieve this battle tactic. I'm going to deep strike it in here in your back line because then I can grab this objective of you. And then you get to the shooting phase, and then you look to your side, and you see that your unit of heart renders is still not on the table. And you go, oh, God. But obviously, because you've explained ahead of time, it's not like they can argue that you're suddenly changed. That from their perspective, they can only react to what you're telling them, and think about how that dynamic plays out if they didn't know that that was your intent. If you're suddenly saying to them, can we go back to the movement phase? I forgot to drop this unit in. And they didn't know that you were planning on it. They're well within their right to say no. They're still within their right to say no if you did announce ahead of time. But what you'll find is by appealing to their sportsmanship, by appealing to their good nature, these issues can be sorted out much more cleanly. And this extends beyond that. This extends to, my intention is to try and get as many bodies on this point as possible from this unit and this unit. And then you forget to pile in, that can get sorted out cleaner because they knew that that was what you were going to do. And you might think that's a bit counterintuitive, but when you put it into practice, you'll find that this comes up a lot and it does go your way far more often. Now, this is not to say that you should just play sloppy, because there will be a line in a sand where your opponent is well within their rights just to say, you know what, I think you're taking the piss. You just need to be on your game. This is where it kind of gets to a bit of a grey area in terms of how much do you give your opponent in terms of leeway to correct mistakes. But what I'm trying to make clear here is if you don't even let your opponent in on what your intentions are, it becomes far harder for them to discern what is legitimately just an oversight versus what is trying to correct a mistake after the fact when your opponent responds. There are still some cons to this. Con number one, your opponent has perfect information. And what I mean by that is you've just told them that you don't think you can win the game unless they kill the slime. They could go out of their way to try and protect it, and you cannot capitalize on them simply not noticing what you're trying to do. And I'll put in brackets there, so, and this really ties into the second point about gotching your opponent. I never want to win games because my opponent didn't know my army. I never want to lose games because my opponent pulled a trick out of their sleeve that I could have known about if I was more experienced, but simply didn't. Other players may feel differently, and this is what I was alluding to earlier about subterfuge, but in reality, players want to have a good, clean game, and they want to beat them based off of what their tactical decisions were. And by hiding information from your opponent, like let's say your unit can revive, let's say you can rally on a 4-up, yeah, you might win, but it's not the same. And you'll have a worse off game because of it, because if you do gotcha your opponent like that, then they may mentally step away from the game. They may be thinking about, why didn't I... Oh, God, I can't believe he got me like that. They may even resent you a little bit for it. And when you have that kind of standoffish attitude, when you've created that kind of environment, it's much harder to get back to that, joyful experience it is playing Warhammer. I realize I'm showing you these cons and talking about why I think it's still worth it. So You can tell that I'm biased here. But it's important to talk about because just because we give our opponent perfect information, it does not mean that we cannot win the game. Like, this is fundamentally a game about movement, and there are very few ways to deny that if your opponent knows what you're trying to do. There are some, but there are very few. And really, do we want to win the wrong way or the right way? So how do we get better at playing with intent? It starts by simply talking to your opponent. You ask them how they're doing. You make your turn their turn and their turn your turn. And what I mean by that is you talk to them. You make it more of an engaging experience, because like I've even asked my opponent at times, like, do you think this is the right move? And they'll oftentimes, if you just ask them, they will respond in kind with an honest answer. We make the process of deciding what you're trying to achieve transparent, and this comes back to the benefits earlier, where if we are transparent, it's easier to correct mistakes. If we're transparent, we're not gotching our opponent. If we are transparent, then they're not sitting there watching you stare at models for 10 minutes at the beginning of your turn. And that sucks. That really does suck, to be sat there in silence. And we keep them engaged by doing this, and we enjoy ourselves more as a result, because this is not an I go you go, like back and forth alternating activations game. You'll go half an hour or more before they can even do meaningful responses. There are some, but obviously you get what I'm trying to say here. But if we let them in, if we let them talk to us about how we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, they're going to enjoy themselves more, because they're going to be thinking about the board state as well. If you're moving a unit, explain why you are moving a unit, i.e. to set up a charge later or get in range to shoot X or Y unit. And this comes back to my point earlier about being able to fix mistakes if they happen, oversights. When we say we play with intent, we basically announce out loud everything that we're doing. I am going to try and cast this spell. This doesn't mean you have to explain like the order that you're going to sequence things. Like, you go to the hero phase, right? I've got 6 spells. It's going to be A, B, C, D, E, F in this order, because obviously there's a showmanship and a gameplay to actually, if your opponent has less denies than you have spells, about what they choose to try and stop, that sort of thing. We don't have to be literal with every single thing that we do, but things like movement, things like shooting, things like charges, we just talk. Like, I'll go, I have 3 units that I'm trying to get in combat. You do the first charge, you do the second charge, you do the third charge. It's simple as that. And the easiest way to make this smooth for you and your opponent is to make it clear that this is what you're trying to achieve before the game begins, when you first get to the table. Because if they go, like, I don't really want to play with intent, then that gives you an opportunity to rethink whether you even want to do it in the first place. Because clearly, if your opponent is like, no, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing, like, it's up to you. This is where the sort of this social contract that you enter into when you play against people. And you'll generally know pretty early on what kind of temperament they have. But as long as you basically talk about what that you are trying to play with intent, this gives them the window of opportunity to respond to it in kind. And it helps you both get on the same page in terms of expectations. And why are expectations important? Well, it's because of sportsmanship. And I've left this blank for a reason, because this is going to be off the top. I'm trying to get better at sportsmanship myself. I have played against a number of players who are absolutely fantastic players. And I've always thought to myself, why do they keep getting sports votes? And oftentimes it's as simple as they play a clean game, they announce clearly what they're trying to do, and they follow through. And why is it good that we do this? It prevents gotcha moments. As I said before, it prevents people from being pulled out of the game and sulking about a misplay. It brings people closer together. It becomes sort of a bonding exercise to talk about what you're doing. And good sportsmanship will mean that players will keep coming back to tournaments. It means that players will have better weekends. It means that they will go home on that Sunday evening and go, you know what, Age of Sigmar is the greatest war game. Like, I love this community. The Age of Sigmar community is unparalleled in my mind. Like, the welcome that I received when I started to play Age of Sigmar was profound. The ongoing efforts that I see within the community to open up our borders to let more people of all walks of life enjoy it is fantastic. We're not there yet. We're trying to make strides, but we're not there yet. But little things like playing with intent and talking to our opponent means that we will become fast friends quite quickly. It means that there are less feel bads because of misinterpretations of what is happening on the board. Like, when you play with intent, the actual the board state becomes much clearer because you're not living in your head. Your opponent doesn't know what you're thinking. But when you present it, you talk about what it is that you're trying to achieve, you let them in, they become more engaged, and you'll find that the whole game just goes so much cleaner, so much more enjoyably. And isn't that why we play this game? Because we want to have fun. We want to really enjoy it. And when we go away for a weekend for 5 rounds of Warhammer, the last thing you want is for game 3 of day 1 to be crap. And then you go, oh, you want to come back in the morning? And then you come back on Sunday morning. No doubt the next game's great, but we just want to avoid that. We want to keep the momentum going. We want to end that round 5 going, you know what? Hell yeah. And I hope that you took away sort of, like, this is important to me. I hope that you take away something from this video. And I want to thank you for watching. If you have got your own tips about playing with intent, feel free to leave them in the comments or engage me on Twitter. I'm happy to talk about that sort of stuff. I am dreading and looking forward immensely to Mancunian Carnage. Cool Boys Army has been submitted, as you saw in my last video. I've not played a tournament for a few months now, but this is kind of going to be opening up the floodgates a little bit because later on in the year I'm signed up to a number of big tournaments. And this idea of playing with intent is something that I'm trying to get better at myself because I haven't always been playing with intent. If you play against me at a tournament, it may well be that I've not done this. And this is because I'm going through this experience myself. And when I made this channel, one of my pillars, one of my main goals was this idea of documenting my own journey as a competitive player in the hopes that other people can help me along and I can help other people along. If you haven't already, go check out Goonhammer. They do great Age of Sigmar coverage, of which I contribute a small piece, that being the weekly competitive innovations column on Wednesdays that covers the best lists of the weekend. And when I say best, I mean top performing. And I talk about why they're interesting. You can catch me at Twitter at LIUK or at FanWargaming. And if you have enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and a subscribe. And until next time, may you have good dice rolls and may you have good games. See you later.